Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll cover all the home teams for you. Saints, LSU, Tulane Pelicans. We'll touch on the River Bell Classic, which is tonight. And of course, we got a great panel to break it down for you. Ricardo LeCompte of Channel 4 Sports, WLAE-TV here in New Orleans, and also Brett Martel, the Associated Press. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Good to have you come down again. Ricardo, let's start with you. First of all, a rebranding of WLAE-TV News, right?
Yeah, we're now WWL Louisiana, so a little change there. We've got some also changes in sports. We're now Saints on 4, Pelicans on 4, all the LSU on 4, all that kind of coverage. So nice little refresh, rebrand, and I'm liking it so far.
Right, yeah, and of course, the great shows you guys have over at Channel 4. Tell us about it.
Well, we've got 4th Down Friday, which is tomorrow night at 10:15. We're in the second week of the playoffs, of the prep football playoffs. We have about, I think, 29 games featuring our metro area teams, and including the Division I Select with all the Catholic League teams going tonight, going tomorrow night. So we've got all the highlight scores there, 10:15, and of course 4th Down on 4, 10:35 Sundays. We got a nice packed show, even though it's a Saints bye week. So we've got Ross Jackson to talk a little Saints as well. We've got Ro Brown actually in, longtime sportscaster here in the city. He's going to actually give us a history of Tulane football and kind of break down what Tulane is doing right now in terms of what historically this program has been, which not much success there, but what they've done recently here under Willie Fritz. It's a nice little talk about him and Doug have that conversation with the Tulane football program. And we also have a nice little feature story on Hahnville's first female boys basketball head coach, Erica Randolph.
I saw that package you did last night. That was an excellent package. Talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so she was an assistant coach on the staff this spring when Yusuf Joseph left. She was named the head coach, so she's the first female coach in Hahnville history. I believe the first female head coach in St. Charles Parish as well. I was at the game, her first game on Tuesday night when they played Rummel, and they won in dramatic fashion. One with the three-pointer with 17 seconds left, won by 1 point. So it was a nice debut for her. But just talking to the players and how much they revere her, and they have the respect for her, and they treat her as a coach. They follow her. They don't really look at, well, I know it's kind of unusual because we talk about men's coaches coaching women, but we never talk about women coaching men, and it's pretty much the same game if you think about it. And I love their perspective of how they treat her as a coach. She knows her X's and O's. She played at Dillard, I think her last 2005 class of Dillard. And so it's a remarkable story just in terms of, we don't see that every day, but she is a very capable coach, and the kids love her.
If y'all missed it, check it out on Fourth Down on Fourth. It's an excellent package. Great job, Ricardo.
Thanks.
Brett, welcome back from the Associated Press. Brett Martel. Brett, tell us a little bit about, again, that fine publication.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of your viewers are familiar with the AP Top 25, which is a big part of our brand in football and in basketball, men's and women's. And so, the AP is based in New York City, and it's a worldwide news organization, and my territory is Louisiana, and people can find our stuff, online a lot, or apnews.com, or on the AP News app for a smartphone, which is free and gives you news from all over the world, including, the Middle East, Ukraine, and Louisiana, including sports.
Now, how long, Brett, have you been with the Associated Press?
Well, I'm in my 28th year.
I thought so, yeah. That's and look how young he looks, huh? He never ages. He never ages. It's incredible. And of course, look, after Katrina, you did news. You were on the ground after Katrina doing that, as well as the sports. So again, a great career for Brett Martel at the Associated Press.
Can I add one thing? It's just that as I have a daughter, and I just think that Ricardo's story is great about that women basketball coach. I think there's really no reason why they can't be great coaches.
Yes.
I think the impediment is maybe just a little bit cultural, but I think for the current generation of kids, it's not even that much for them anymore. They're not playing. They're just evaluating talent and putting people in position to succeed. And I think it's great. I think it's the future.
Yeah, she was saying that she knows the X's and O's.
Right.
She can anticipate plays. She knows, the game. And really, as I kept saying the same thing, basketball's still basketball.
That's right.
So if you can talk basketball, you can garner the respect of any locker room, and certainly she knows her basketball.
Right. And we've seen the introduction of, again, female coaches into the NBA. And again, I think that we will see at some point a female head coach in the NBA.
Right. Whether it was Becky Hammond, maybe Dawn Staley, if she ever, decides the South Carolina thing, even though I think she settled there. I thought, Becky Hammond. But certainly it's trending that way, that you will see a woman, a female coaching an NBA team, and it will get to a point one day where it'll just be accepted. It'll just be like, go home. Like we'll garner, we'll give you the attention because of your performance rather than the fact that historically you're the first female, and we'll get to that point hopefully one day.
Look at our business. Again, you have female broadcasters now doing play-by-play and color on national broadcast as a tandem. Again, at one point you see a male and a female. Now you see two females doing it. They do an excellent job.
Right.
Doris Burke is one of the best out there.
Right. No, she's solid. Beth Minnows does it as well for ESPN when she does college football. And we're seeing more of that integration of that. And I think it's the generation, as Brett mentioned, like it's more accepted now in a sense. And hopefully we get to one day where that's not even a
not even thinking about it. That's right.
Right. But we got to get there first. And
absolutely. And we're on our way, though. We are on our way. All right, let's talk about the Saints. They are 5-5. They're still in first place in the NFC South. They're on a bye week. Atlanta's next. They lose to the Vikings 27-19. My thoughts have not changed. This has looked like although I thought in the beginning of the season this was going to be a team that could win 10, 11 games. This is a team that I thought would win the NFC South, and I thought would have a chance in the playoffs. They've been consistently inconsistent all season long, and they look like a 500 team. Ricardo, why don't you take it first? Talk about the season has been as we've kind of reached this bye week now for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Consistently inconsistent team. I think they are an average team if you just look at it in terms of, I know we know the names, and I know we get enamored with the fact that, hey, I mean, if you look at the roster defensively, offensively, you can check off names. You can say names and be like, oh, I know that guy. That guy is a guy that could stand out, and you add that to a mix, and you go, wow, they should be better than what they are. If you look at this team, though, I mean, they're average. I mean, if you break down the bottom 5 teams that they've played, that the Saints have played, they're 3-0 against them. Against the 3 teams who currently would be in the playoffs as the playoffs started today, they're 0-3. That just tells you right there that they beat the teams that they're supposed to beat. They can, they do their job there. The teams they don't beat, or they can't be, or maybe a little bit better, you can see that they're not as good as that top tier team. Now I think they still get in the playoffs. I still think they win the NFC South because, granted, this is a weak division. But I think just from face value, I mean, to me, I said they were a 9-8 team to start. I still feel like they're a 9-8 team, and they have the benefit of a weak schedule. So this is what we're seeing. We're seeing they're beating the teams they're supposed to beat. They're not beating the teams that they, probably are a little bit out of their, out of their class. And this is kind of where we're at in this season right now.
And Brett, when you look at this season, and you, as Ricardo mentioned, the quarterbacks, the schedule, a lot of people looking at this team, a veteran team, what they've been able to do in terms of adding some talent to, again, some positions of need, that this would be a team that maybe would dominate the NFC South and maybe win 10, 11 games, or maybe 9, as Ricardo mentioned. What are your thoughts on how they've looked thus far?
Yeah, I think the only area in which they have been consistent is that they have not won against any teams that have a winning record, and they've usually won against teams with losing records. And that's so that in a way, in a roundabout way, you can say that they've been consistent in that, or it's predictable, but it's interesting with these teams in the NFL. I use this line in my analysis on Monday because the way the NFL is structured. Making the playoffs is one thing. Appearing to belong is another. And right now they don't appear to belong. But, we have seen teams that we feel like they have some talent, they should be better than they are, and they're just frustratingly inconsistent, not just in New Orleans, but I always think about the 2007 New York Giants. And if I remember right, I don't know if that was the year that Jim Fossil said this team is going to the playoffs, okay, but it was one of those teams that wasn't really that great for the first half of the season, maybe the first 10 games, but they somehow got into the playoffs and they upset everybody in the NFC, and then they ruined the Patriots' unbeaten season, which was unthinkable. So if people are looking for hope from the Saints to kind of peak at the right time, maybe they can. There is a precedent for it. It's just it doesn't happen very often. I mean, it's less likely that it would happen.
Yeah, and if I would go in the tier of an Eli Manning who catches fire in the postseason, which he has, versus Derek Carr, maybe that's where it kind of stops. But I do like that comparison of maybe a team that can catch fire, and certainly because they have that talent, maybe it is possible. All you have to do is just get into the playoffs, and then anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
And they're guaranteed at least if they win the division, they're guaranteed at least one playoff home game. Then you see what happens when they go on the road. So there is time for this thing to turn around, but I think from what we've seen on this body of work for this first half of the season, I don't have much confidence in saying that this Saints team could go far when they get into the playoffs, if they make the playoffs.
Guys, that's the frustrating thing about this season is you see the talent level, and I think the fans are frustrated because, again, they believed coming in this season this was going to be a season that maybe they could take the next step. They have not done that. It's been, again, win one, lose two, whatever. And so it's been a tough situation. It kind of starts on the defense, where everybody thought, again, this was going to be a championship type defense. The mind-blowing thing is still having issues with mobile quarterbacks in a league now that is full of mobile quarterbacks.
Yeah, and you can tell that they're trying to change at least the type of player they've had on the defensive line. And you can see that with the drafting Isaiah Foskey. I think B.J. Ojulari, when he was available, could have been that better fit than maybe Foskey.
Had a big game this past weekend.
And maybe that's what you needed, that edge rusher, somebody who's got a little bit more speed, probably undersized. There was for a long time, we know the body type that they wanted to get, somebody who was a run stopper, a big guy, a Cam Jordan, a Marcus Davenport, that type of body, which simply right now with the quarterbacks, especially with, you don't have as many pocket passers. I mean, one of the worst things that probably could have happened for the Saints was a Matt Ryan ritiring, because that's the type of quarterbacks they would like to go after. But now you're seeing more and more of the quarterbacks being a mobile type. You see Josh Dobbs last week escaping, and the week before, Tyson Bagent rushing for 70 yards and getting out. This is a guy who's a Division II undrafted rookie. So I think they're trying to, change the body type. You saw a lot, this offseason, the defensive tackles they brought in. They got rid of Shai Tuttle, got rid of David Onyemata, and they've added Shepard, and they've added Colin Saunders. And so they're trying to change it a little bit, but that's where it starts. It's that defensive line. If you're talking about the inconsistency, especially on defense, it starts with that pass rush, and they simply haven't been able to do that.
They bring Pierre-Paul in this week. I mean, how much difference does that make on the defensive line? And your same question, your thoughts on again, this defense so far?
Well, yeah, the defense has been good against certain types of offenses, but a lot of their best games again came against teams that are kind of struggling too. I mean, they certainly got off to a good start, not allowing a touchdown until the fourth quarter against Carolina. But now look at Carolina; that's what is 1-9 team, I think, or something. And Tennessee has really struggled. So, they look great at times. That you can say, well, why is there this trend that they're giving up a lot of points early and that they're and they're shutting teams down in the second half. Well, part of it could be that teams tend to be much more aggressive early, and then when they get a lead, they can manage the lead.
Yes.
And so they might not take as many chances, and certainly Minnesota wasn't taking as many chances in the second half.
Right.
You know, not going for it on 4th and short, and then of course other things had to happen for Minnesota to not pull away, like missing the field goal and having the touchdown called back, and then getting sacked out of field goal range. So that loss could have been worse than it was. And so I just see a defense that is still looking for consistency as well, but is statistically in the top third of the league.
The lack of discipline in the lanes to be able to corral a mobile quarterback has been an issue for this team. They used a spy a lot last week, but that didn't seem to even work for them.
Yeah, and it's trying to figure out and tinker as a defense as a whole what to do with there. And I still give credit to what they do after that first 15 scripted plays.
Okay.
And you've seen some of these slow starts defensively. You know, most of these teams are going offensively to that first 15 script and trying to figure out tendencies and what they want to do. I think still, when you get to second half, and a lot of the reasons why they're able to be better in the second half is because I give credit to this defensive staff, give credit to these players adjusting to what they're seeing and the tendencies that they're seeing in game. I think that's where they excel, but it's like, when do we get to see the whole game where you're like, not only are you starting off fast, figuring out the tendency quickly, and then at the same time, the second half, making those adjustments, making sure they don't do that. Certainly, their second half's been a lot better than the first half, and maybe if you get to a quicker start defensively, maybe that does help the team off you know, as a whole.
Brett, on the offensive side of the ball, it started off with the offensive line giving up a lot of sacks, pressures. That kind of thing got in Carr's head a bit. He seems to be still hesitant at times. There have been days when it's been spectacular, and days when they have been able to move the football. The inconsistency in the play calling, not using Taysom Hill after what he's been able to do. Olave disappearing at times. Now you're looking at, again, Michael Thomas maybe injured, having to use maybe Perry more. Talk a bit about this offense and offense as a whole, and then maybe if you would kind of morph into the quarterback position on where they are now.
Yeah, I do think sometimes the play calling comes down to the coach's feel for how the matchups are going and also the score of the game and so forth. And with the defense struggling early, they fell behind. Maybe they couldn't be as patient as they would have liked to with Taysom Hill, and also that Vikings have a good defensive front, and they might have thought that just because it worked, the previous week, it might not have been as favorable a play call against Minnesota. So, I don't know. I mean,
the stats prove out when he carries the football, they win.
Yeah, but those stats can be a result of favorable matchups to begin with. It's just like quarterbacks whose teams are behind all the time tend to throw for a lot of yards because, I mean, which Carr did with the Raiders for a lot, But the key with Carr that we have to keep watching and that he has to prove is not that he can throw for a lot of yards, but how efficient is he on third down and in the red zone and in clutch situations. And that the jury's really still out on that.
I agree with that.
And if he doesn't get better in that area, then they will have spent a lot of money for not a significant upgrade in production at that position. And that, in a hard cap league, that's tough. That's tough.
Yeah, and because of that, lack of production, red zone, third down numbers, that's why we're going to this bye week going, maybe Jameis Winston is the better option. We've had this, talk where, Dennis Allen's been asked, like, is Derek Carr still your quarterback? Now, I think if you're breaking down both quarterbacks, I think you still have a better chance of winning games with Derek Carr over Jameis Winston. I think the body of work tells you that. But I think in the offseason, when you're paying somebody that much money and you're expecting a top tier quarterback, and you're getting these types of diminished results, it's like, why are we spending this much money? Like, why have you earned that much money to garner that and have the production that we're having, which has kind of been, all right, well, this offense has kind of been stuck in the mud through 9 games, 10 games. So it's like, all right, so where's the return on this? So yeah, I think he still has to play up to an expectation that he hasn't quite been there yet. I'm not saying he can't. Maybe there's still a time for him to kind of turn this around. But so far, he hasn't, and that's why you're having even quarterback questions in the bye week of going, maybe there is a better option, and unfortunately, there isn't a better option.
Guys, how much of this is Carmichael helping them, though? Again, Ross Jackson had a stat this week. It's so funny he brought this up because I'm watching the game on Sunday, and I'm thinking to myself, why are they not using more motion? They used 12 times out of 69 plays. They used motion. That's 17% of the time. When I look at Miami and what they've been able to do, especially with Tyreek Hill, moving him all over the field, it reminds me a lot of what Peyton did with Breeze and with Reggie Bush and other players. They dictated to the defense on what they were going to do. They used motion in a lot of cases to figure out what the defense was going to do. And when you have as many great athletes and playmakers as they have on this offense, why they are not using that motion or using those playmakers to the best of the ability to be able to, again, to get this offense moving again?
Well, I think it's a good question, and part of succeeding for a long time in major professional sports league is the ability to evolve and so forth. But also, you have to, I think Pete Carmichael Jr., one of his things is that he tries to work very closely with the quarterback and see what plays the quarterback are comfortable with and defer in that regard. And so, you have to figure out what the right balance is, and it is still the first 10 games of the Derek Carr era, so you don't want to prejudge, but the sample size is getting bigger and the results aren't necessarily improving, and so you're at some point it could get too late. But with the schedule of the way it is, they have one game left against a above 500 team, Detroit, which is tough. Right. But yeah, if trends continue as they have, they could actually win 10. They could go 5-2 and win 10 games. Right. But but whether they'd be any better than remember in 2010 when Seattle made the playoffs and they didn't really look like they belonged. Right. Marshawn Lynch has a beast mode game. They upset the Saints, but then they're out the next week. And so even if the Saints win 9 or 10 games and make the playoffs, it's more likely that it would be like the 2010 Seattle than the 2007 New York Giants. But still, it's interesting.
It seems like, and look, it was all about continuity, right? Okay, that's the reason why you brought back, brought Dennis Allen in. That's why you tried to keep the staff there. That's why Carmichael was together. It seemed as if, like, instead of an evolution of this offense, there's been a regression of this offense. Just based on, look, you have Kamara, you have Shaheed, you have Olave. We go right down the line of all the weapons you have. And Carr is, look, he might be a middle of the road quarterback, but he's a starting NFL quarterback. It's just, it's mind-blowing that we're not seeing this offense be hitting on all cylinders as you get into the 10 games into the season.
Yeah, I think that's, again, I think people get enamored with the names.
Right.
If you're out, say, Alvin Kamara, you're adding Chris Olave, you see Rashid Shaheed doing what he's doing. If you're hearing these names, you go, okay, why aren't they doing better? And, part of it is probably rhythm of play calling. And maybe part of it is your performance at quarterback. I think there's a lot more things that, offensively, why they just haven't, figured it out where it is. Or one week they like against the Colts, they're converting. They're 3 or 4 in the red zone. Right. They're scoring touchdowns. They're scoring over 30 points. And then, the following week they're not doing the same thing. And you're just like, what's going on? And again, I think it is a lot of things. It is, again, you have the middle of the road quarterback, but he's serviceable. Like he's a good quarterback. He's better than what you had as the option last year. And then, you have Pete Carmichael trying to figure out his rhythm and what he wants to do. It's funny, like, you can't say they really have an identity in a sense. Like, you really can't say that. And it's I think that's where the struggles and the frustration comes. If you knew, like, hey, like, we want to be a run-first team, or we want to be a team that uses motion, like the Dolphins, and do this or whatever. Like, they could be whatever they want to do. They just haven't really figured it out. And I think part of it is you have a new quarterback. It is, an offensive coordinator still trying to figure out where his place is, because for so many years it was Sean Payton calling it. And he was there, but he wasn't, the guy in charge. Sure. So you've got now a season and a half of seeing this, under DA, and it's one of those things where it's like, all right, will it improve? Do we see the regression? And it's easier to make changes and stuff when this team doesn't make the playoffs. Right. If this team makes the postseason, you've got harder questions to figure out. And it feels like if it kind of progresses the way it is, you wouldn't necessarily get a DA, but you're certainly going to make changes on your coaching staff. I don't know what that's going to be, but it could be that. It's so much, like, it's like, do we still have the same problems present after we do that? Right. It's so much easier to just be like, well, if this team doesn't make the playoffs, then we know we can just, start over and scratch, and start from scratch. But I don't think we're going to get to that point because, again, I feel like this team is good enough to make the postseason, but you're still going to have the problems after the postseason and then when you're trying to figure out. And I think that's the more concerning thing is, what is this thing going to look like, down the road?
Down the road. what is this thing going to look like down the road?
Yeah, it's a good question. A lot of how they do the rest of this year, I think, depends a little bit on injuries and the offensive line's consistency and so forth. And we definitely see not just Derek Carr, but a lot of quarterbacks, their footwork gets bad and their accuracy, and their timing accuracy all goes away when they don't trust the offensive line, even sometimes when the blocking is good, but they just don't trust it,
Right.
Seeing ghosts. That's what they say.
That's right. Seeing ghosts.
Yep.
And so, and they've been doing a lot of musical chairs there, and part of it's because of injuries, part of it's because, unfortunately, they misjudged Trevor Penning's readiness, and that's a wrench in things.
Yes, it is.
But like we're talking about over these last 7 games, if the offensive line kind of coalesces, and starts to play better, and Derek Carr feels like he can reliably trust what he's going to get out of them, then you could see that go in the right direction. I would agree. Mickey Loomis is a guy in terms of stability and so forth. They would almost have to kind of look not bought in and go off the rails in order for a big change at the top. But you could certainly see. My comparison would be what Sean Payton did after 2008. He had it with the defensive coordinator. He loved Gary Gibbs, but they just weren't getting results. He made a change, and they improved dramatically and won the Super Bowl. And Mickey Loomis was the GM back then, so he's seen that formula work before, and he's also a guy who favors stability. He wants to see the Saints in the mold of the Pittsburgh Steelers. How many coaching changes have they made? Right? But they do have staff changes, and they tinker all the time, but they like to have stability at the top. And so that's what I would envision in the future.
I think the bottom would have to fall out.
Right.
And I think that season ticket renewals would have to, again, start to dip for them to make a move. I think win or lose, Dennis Allen's back next year.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. Again, it has to go, and that's the one thing I do give credit for Dennis Allen is that in these games where they don't look good, they don't quit. They don't get blown out. He still has the locker room, and I think as long as he still has those guys bought into what they're trying to do, even though the success may not show on the field, he's going to still be the head coach, and I don't envision him getting fired unless, again, he loses the locker room. You see them losing bad, and you could just see that everyone's kind of checked out. That's the only way the DA gets fired.
All right, guys, last question for you. Playoff team?
Yes.
Yeah, again, whether they make it or they belong is not the same, but they are on track
That's
to make it.
That's a different question, right?
They're not only on track, to make it. The schedule favors them making it. If you had to bet on it, you'd bet on them making it. So, but that's why if they don't make the playoffs, it's a bad look.
It is. It is a very bad look. Especially, again, with the schedule and the quarterback's been into play. And then look, next year it's a first place schedule if you get, what I'm saying? And that's where, again, you really find out what happens when you have that first place schedule. All right, Ricardo LeCompte of Channel 4 Sports. Also, Brett Martel of the Associated Press are our guest. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We'll take a break, hear from our underwriters, and then we'll come back. We'll talk LSU, Tulane, Pelicans, and we'll also touch on the River Bell Classic. All that coming up here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Stay tuned.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Acadian Custom Shutters is locally owned and operated, specializing in interior and exterior shutters and window coverings, as well as awnings and patio covers. Acadian Custom Shutters offers American products with personal service and workmanship, serving the South Shore, North Shore, and Mississippi Gulf Coast. More information is available at 985-893-3119 or AcadianCustomShutters.com.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Brett Martel, the Associated Press, Ricardo LeCompte of Channel 4 Sports are on our panel tonight. All right, let's talk a little bit about LSU. They're 7-3, 5-2 in the SEC, 55-35 winners over Florida. They're 15th in the college football playoff poll, 15th in the AP and coaches poll. Georgia State on tap this week. They finish up with A&M minus Jimbo Fisher, who was fired this week. Instead of jumping right into LSU, let's talk about Jaden Daniels.
Okay,
let's talk about Jaden Daniels, what he's done this year, his chances for the Heisman. And in a year where, again, you've got like Penix and Nix and how was it?
Marvin Harrison
Jr. from Ohio State, and you look at RG3, you look at Tim Tebow, and there was one other,
Lamar Jackson.
When they were up for the Heisman, they were considered the best players in the country. And if I can remember going back, I don't think there was anybody that was even close to them in terms of the media hype, everything that's going on. There seems to be a split now in terms of, again, what coast you're on, right? Okay, they got two guys on the West Coast that are in Penix and Nix, and of course in the Midwest with Marvin Harrison Jr. I look at the stats, maybe I'm biased. I think he's the best player in America. I think what he's done so far with this team and carrying this team to 7 wins with a bad defense, that he is deserving. Ricardo, what are your thoughts on him getting the Heisman? I think he'll be in New York, but winning the Heisman with, again, 3 losses, not being in national championship contention.
So I was trying to think back because I covered RG3's Heisman thing when I was in Waco in 2011.
Please, talk about it.
What happened was he was putting up the numbers because I mean they were under our Brile system. They were throwing up numbers, and there was a stretch in the middle of the season where they went to A&M. And they lost to A&M badly. Ryan Tannehill was a quarterback, and he threw for like 5 or 6 touchdowns. Then the following week, they played Oklahoma State and got blown out in Stillwater, and he kind of just was off the radar. But then he went on, and like Baylor ended up winning the last 5 games of the regular season, and they ended up winning the bowl game, the Alamo Bowl against Washington. In those 5 games, the one game that was like cemented his Heisman candidacy was the Oklahoma game, where they had a top 5 Oklahoma team come into Waco, and it was RG3 taking him out, and that was the moment because he had started gaining more momentum around the league. And I think the only person was really like Andrew Luck was like the guy that, you know, and again, Andrew Luck was the best player on the best, you know, Stanford has a really good team. So the one thing that I think is going to hurt Jaden Daniels is that with Georgia State and Texas A&M, you're not going to have that high marquee moment. It was a shame that I think when he got knocked out early in the 4th quarter against Alabama, that he could, you know, him and Miller were going at it back and forth. I don't know if LSU wins that game, but certainly I think he would have, if you could still cement going, wow, he did this to Alabama, like on this stage. So I think that's what hurts him, is that he's going to have to, in these 2 games against, you know, like you'll have that 11 a.m. tip against Texas A&M, or kickoff against Texas A&M, and you know, some of the country's going to see it. But you got to go off. Like he's got to put up numbers, you know, some remarkable numbers to just get consideration to probably possibly win it. Because I still think if you've got 2 good quarterbacks potentially facing off in the Pac-12 championship, and they're playing for a championship, and you're watching, that's going to leave a lasting impression on Heisman voters. Because remember, they don't have to turn that thing in until after the championship Saturday. Jaden Daniels won't be there. Those 2 quarterbacks will be. So he's 3rd in the odds for the Heisman. I think that's right about where he's at, and I still think it's Nix and it's Penix, and I think the winner of that Pac-12 championship game, barring Washington or Oregon stumbling before that, is going to win the Heisman.
Your thoughts, Brent?
Well, I do think the championship games are a double-edged sword because although it's another chance to prove it to the voters, you might be facing a good defense that might actually prove to the voters why they should go back to Jaden Daniels. But look, I mean, I don't know. Jaden Daniels, again, I'm probably biased too, just because I cover him. It has nothing to do with emotional investment or being a fan of anybody. It's just that I have more exposure to Jaden Daniels. But he seems to me to be one of the most exciting quarterbacks I've ever covered. I mean, Joe Burrow I covered, and he was great. But Jaden Daniels can do things that he couldn't do. The way he just, you know, like that 85-yard touchdown run where he changes speeds, accelerates, leaves people in the dust, fakes them out. I mean, it's just incredible. The game-winning touchdown run, I want to say that he had at Missouri after he had gotten hurt. I mean, he was such a warrior in that play. And I'm just talking about the runs and not talking about the bombs to Neighbors and Thomas. You know, so he's just so dynamic and exciting and individually extraordinary, and probably the main reason that LSU beat Alabama last year and won the SEC West, and a main reason that they've done as well as they have this year, especially against that win at Missouri. It turned out to be one of their best wins of the year. And Alabama really couldn't do much with him. They did get that tip drill interception, and then knocked him out of the game with an illegal hit, which was too bad. But before that, they were having trouble with him at home.
Absolutely.
And Alabama might not lose again this season, for all we know. So that's why I think Jaden Daniels, when you look at not just the numbers, but the spectacular way in which he's achieved those numbers, is, to me, has got to be a leading candidate.
Right, yeah, and certainly the numbers will say that. You know, when you're comparing around, you know, with Penix's numbers, I know he's got more total touchdowns than Penix, and then again, Bo Nix is just thrown in there because, you know, he's got those stats and he's playing for a good team. I don't mind. You know, I think we're now accepting the fact that it doesn't necessarily mean that your team's success is going to, you know, garner you the Heisman. And I think, you know, when you're seeing that list of three guys who've won the Heisman despite their teams having 3 losses, it really, you know, it depends on what your definition of what you're voting for the Heisman is. Is it the best player or is it the best team award, you know? And I think it would be fine to give Jaden Daniels the Heisman this year because he has been the best player, not only in the SEC, but probably in the country in terms of what he's been able to do. And it is remarkable from that year 1 to year 2 jump here in the system, what he's been, been able to do. Again, when just the way these things kind of work, regionally he's going to get the votes in the South. The West, as you were mentioned, in the Midwest. But it does come down to that final week. What's that lasting impression on most of those other voters who don't have a buy-in regionally or a player? They're just simply looking at a game and they go, all right, you know, I've watched all season. Who's doing it in this final game? And it does hurt that, you know, Jaden Daniels is not going to be a part of that. Marvin Harrison Jr. will be, Bo Nix probably will be, and Michael Penix will be. And I think that's the votes where you have to get the ones that are waiting until that final week to watch that championship game to see who it is. And with those two quarterbacks, if one does outplay the other or looks good in that win for their team, guaranteed he's probably going to win the Heisman. Just how trends of voting over the years have gone.
You just have to hope the voters are savvy enough to remember that Jaden Daniels doesn't play defense.
Exactly. And that's one reason why he should get the votes is because defensively LSU has been he's been the team.
He's carried them. He's carried them. And again, when that stat came up last week, first player in FBS history to pass for over 350 yards, rush for over 200 yards in a single game. That's all you need to see. I mean, at that point, okay? And then, look, the point you made, how much better he has gotten from last year to this year. Really didn't throw the ball over the middle last year. Was hesitant. Again, you know, one read and run. He goes through. You see him go through his progressions now. He throws the ball with accuracy. He can drop it in the bucket for you. He can again. He's got some great receivers, but he's made those receivers as well. I just think again, when you look at what the award was supposed to be, and again, I know it's turned into a quarterback award in a lot of cases. It's supposed to be about the best player in the country, individual. And to me, he's the best individual player in the country.
Right, and then some people would also argue that Marvin Harrison Jr. has been that because Ohio State, their quarterback is probably not at any of those levels. It's probably a few tiers lower, but he offensively has been Ohio State. So that's where, like, those 4 guys are probably going to be in New York. And again, I think Jaden Daniels' best chance, and I know, like, Brian Kelly was asked about, you know, during the teleconference on Wednesday, like, are you going to keep him in there in the second half if this thing is blowing out, you know, blowout just because you got to, you know, pad the stats? I wouldn't so much do it against Georgia State, but definitely that last game of the season, you've just got to let him go against A&M, and they can do it against a team that just fired their head coach. That's kind of in disarray, and again, you know, it's a roster with, you know, 4 or 5-star guys, and if he's doing those same things against Texas A&M, that at least could be his, you know, lasting impression. I still think you mentioned that 80-yard run against Florida. I always go, what's been your Heisman moment?
85.
85. I thought the 51-yarder.
It was even.
I thought it was even better because they were down. Florida had all the momentum, and then he breaks off a 51, like shoots a linebacker, and he just bursts. Like, that was my Heisman moment for Jaden. I went, wow, that like changed the complexion of the game.
Let's talk Tulane. 9-1, 6-0 in the AAC. 24th in the college football poll. They dropped one spot from 23rd last week. They're 17th in the AP in the college poll. That's the coaches poll. Pardon me. 27-24 winners over Tulsa. At FAU this week, they finish up at Texas San Antonio at home. If they win both of those games, they're in the American Athletic Conference Championship at home at Yeoman. Before I get into Tulane and the season, I want to talk about Willie Fritz and I want to talk about Michael Pratt. Let's talk Michael Pratt first. Michael Pratt has one more year of eligibility left. There's been a discussion now on my shows, on other shows. What is he going to do? If Willie Fritz stays, and that is a big if, do you think Michael Pratt will stay for a 5th year, or do you think he will? Again, a lot of this depends on NIL money, in my opinion. Or do you think he will go to a Power 5 team, go 1 year with and get some NIL money, try to get maybe his draft stock up in a year next year, where again it's not going to be as not many top quarterbacks we'll see this year's draft, or will he go to the Senior Bowl and then go into the NFL draft? Your thoughts?
I think every quarterback, ultimately, if you have a chance want to play in the NFL, you want to pursue that. And I think it's going to end up being, what is the feedback he's getting? And if they go, hey, you're NFL ready, then I could see him take that Senior Bowl invite, go to the Senior Bowl, and then go ahead to the combine and do the whole thing and try to be up there in terms of quarterbacks. You mentioned that quarterback class that could be coming out. It is a fairly loaded class. Maybe it is smart to go next year and be in that class, in which case does he stay at Tulane? And I think it does matter if Willie Fritz is there or not.
I think it does.
And if he, if Tulane retains him, and there's going to be some places that will be interested in him once again. I mean, that's if you're looking at it, you need a head coach to turn around a program. Certainly, what you've seen at Tulane has been nothing short of remarkable.
True.
But yeah, if he doesn't come back next year and Pratt wants to take that 1 year, the option was there last year for him to go and possibly go to Florida and be the quarterback there. They were looking for a quarterback. Yes. But yeah, it's not so much NIL money for that. I would just say, what's going to be his best opportunity as Michael Pratt's
to showcase himself?
To showcase himself and get into the NFL. That's ultimately what all these quarterbacks, if you're at that tier, how do I get to that next level? So he's going to do what's best for him to get to the NFL.
Same question.
Right. Well, yeah, I think, though, that if he does stay in college, he needs to do what's really going to elevate his profile. And so, as much as you like Tulane, I think he needs to look for a major conference team that's loaded, that not necessarily follow Willie where he goes, because Willie's going to be rebuilding.
Right.
But he needs to go somewhere where his odds of success, nothing's guaranteed in college football.
They're a quarterback away, right?
Yeah, that they're a quarterback away where he's going to be in all those big-time games and have a chance. Because the impression is this season that, as well as Tulane has done, first of all, he didn't get to play against Ole Miss, where he really could have showcased himself against the SEC.
Right.
And that was the one game where he didn't want to miss in terms of his draft stock, and he had to.
Right.
And the reason he had to miss is because he made a bad decision the week before, scrambling on 3rd and long when the game was
late in the fourth quarter.
And then not going down after he scrambled.
Right.
So he's looked really good at times this year. He's looked really good in the clutch, especially.
Right.
But then they've had these lulls in games where they've had to end up pulling out.
Right. Which has been a big problem, which is why I think they dropped in the polls this week.
Could be, yeah. His signature game right now, I think, is Memphis. That may not be enough to get him where he wants to go in the draft. So I think there's actually a decent chance, maybe a coin flip's chance that he plays again next year, but most likely transferring.
Yeah. I hope he comes back to Tulane. I think he's got a good chance if Fritz stays, okay, and he decides, looking at the landscape, that maybe again next year's a better year for me. But again, the lure of going to a Power 5 conference team, being on national TV, again, and probably again another boatload of NIL money thrown his way is going to be hard to turn down. Let's talk Willie Fritz. You guys may have been at the press conference this week. Again, I watched, where again it was asked about the athletic directorship position over at Tulane, and it was mentioned Courtney Gosha again was his guy. That's his dude. He has been consulted. That was one of the things we were wondering about. Okay, where's Willie Fritz in the mix here? Are they talking to him? And they might not be able to talk to any of the other coaches, but he's the guy that put Tulane back on the map. He's the reason why the NIL money's flowing. He's the reason why, again, the donors are giving money for all the facilities because of him. What do you think his future is? Does it come down to, again, Gosha being the athletic director for him to stay? If he is not the athletic director, does he move on, or does he move on because he's 63 years old and this might be his last opportunity to get to a Power 5 conference?
I know a lot of age gets thrown around.
Right.
So, when you're looking at rebuilding programs, if you're a program, you're going, well, he is 63, like, we're trying to rebuild, like, do we go that direction? And honestly, to me, like, a good coach is a good coach. I don't care how old they are. If they're good enough, like, get him in there.
He's got a lot of energy. He's a young 60-year-old.
He does not seem like he's a 60-year-old, running on the sideline there. It is kind of interesting because, he had the opportunity to jump and go to Georgia Tech last season, which, I think that would have been a great fit for him. I think that would have been a great, next stop in a Power 5, conference. He's going to hear the overtures. I would probably venture to say that it is probably, lack of a better term, it is a coin flip. It just depends on kind of how that AD search goes, what he feels comfortable with the direction of this athletic program, what's going to be the buy-in for this football program. Because now it's been 2 seasons now where you've had this much success, and over his tenure, this rebuild has been so impressive. It's like, are we going to continue as an athletic program, continuing to pour the resources into football to make football a viable thing here at Tulane? So there are a lot of different factors that could end up with this decision. I would say, if I had to just bet on it today, I'd say he would stay at Tulane. But there's a lot of factors that would end up being, we end up seeing a new coach at Tulane by next season. But I would say as of now, I think Willie stays.
I think it has a lot to do with who ends up being AD. But your thoughts?
I think that has a lot to do with it too, and also just what the other offers are. He has to be careful to consider how much confidence he has in not only the incoming athletic administration at Tulane, but wherever he might be going, and what kind of backing he'll have. What he's built here is, that's his, and you don't just throw it away. But Tulane, you don't just walk away from something that you put so much effort into that you know what you're getting. But I think Tulane would have to continue to improve facilities, have an AD he likes, probably give him a raise, do these things that show him that they value what he's accomplished and what he still can do here. I don't know. It's hard to tell with him how much he really still covets just for the sake of having a major conference head coaching job, as opposed to the right one. After all he's been through here. But it's I don't think. I know he likes New Orleans, but I don't think that the community is really. It's just going to be the job.
I would agree with that. And
he's
again,
a Midwestern guy, and I think
some people say if Kansas comes to calling, where he's from, would he go there, finish out his career? The thing is, again, for a guy that has he started at the bottom. He started junior college, okay, and then worked everywhere he's gone, he's won. He's built programs. For him, is there a thirst to go to a Power 5 program and say, I can do the same thing here?
I think there may just be a thirst to win. Ultimately, if you're feeling like you're spry at 63 and you can do this, there's still that competitive fire. So it depends on, does he want another challenge? Is that still whatever, or does he want to be at a program like Tulane where you're seeing it build up? And if they're going to invest in the type of investment you need to be a legit football program, if he's part of that since he's built to this point, and if they're going to invest to him, then it's like, all right, so now I'm at a point where let's get this thing running and let's dominate the landscape, that we've never seen with Tulane football. So it just depends on where he wants to be in terms of, does that competitive fire to build another Power 5 program this time? Maybe prove that I could do it at that level. We don't know his internal motivations or his intentions. We can't, go into his mind. But, I think for somebody who's been so successful at so many different stops, I wouldn't put it past him if he would want to try that challenge.
Anything you want to add?
Yeah, just also, the administration would have to back him and get him more money for assistants too. I think, because I think he's probably learned over time that in some respects you're as good as your staff.
Especially at Tulane, where again, if an assistant does well, it's usually a stepping
Right,
stone.
yeah.
right.
Right? Yeah. So you want to make sure you're paying
And
your
so he
assistants.
lost Will Hall, but he's weathered that
Yeah.
quite
Yes,
well,
he has.
actually.
It's true. All right, guys, let's talk about Tulane, the team, for a moment before we go to the Pelicans. We want to talk Riverbell Classic for a moment as well. I felt like they dropped in the college football playoff poll because they have played so many close games against teams they're better than. When you're looking at the records of these teams, and again allowing these teams to kind of hang around, that's the reason why I thought they dropped one spot. That's my opinion. Does this team have to look FAU this week, and then Texas Antonio next week, and then you're getting into a championship game? You can't have these lulls that you're having, or again that you've been having these last few weeks. Do you see them turning that around?
Based on how they played against Memphis, I think that they have the ability to turn that around. Sometimes I was talking to local sports columnist Jeff Duncan about this, and we were old friends with Bob Fortas, who used to cover horse racing and fairgrounds.
Yeah.
And he would say, Bob would say, there might be a race where the second place horse was really gaining down the stretch but couldn't quite overcome the favorite horse or the better horse that ended up winning. And Bob would always say, that leading horse, it may have been close to the end, that horse was never going to let the second horse pass. He was running as fast as he needed to run to win that race. And you can see that that's what Tulane has done recently has reminded me of that, because they could have won those games by more. The two of those victories, they ran the last 7+ minutes off the clock and decided not to score.
Right, not to score, right. Which I thought they should have scored.
Yeah.
I got to be honest with you, because everything's style points now.
Yeah, because if they were looking for style points with voters who were only going to, not every voter can go back and watch all the highlights and look through all the game notes and see exactly how it played out. But they were just trying to win, and Willie Fritz is a by-the-book guy, and that way he loves the analytics in terms of whether it's going for it on 4th down or managing the clock. And so I think that's why they could turn it around if they have to. But I'll tell you what, old Tulane implodes in these close games.
That's true.
And new Tulane always seems to come through.
Right. Ultimately, that's what it is. And I'm glad you brought that up, because yes, that's how this program has turned over the years, because they lose those games in the past. They would give up those leads, not be able to sustain drives to win it, or go on game-winning drives late to win it. And yes, they drop because of style points. That's what the college football playoff is now.
Right.
Like, you've got to win impressively to go up there. But
that's why I was screaming at the TV. You got to score.
Right.
You got to score.
But when you're still looking at it, I mean, they're in a good position right now.
Right.
They're still in the top 25.
Right.
And your style points are going to beat these three teams. And FAU, UTSA, and then possibly SMU in the conference championship. Like, those are three better teams. But again, if you go the horse racing analogy, maybe they know that they're the best horse in this AAC, and it's like, all right, well, we'll turn it on when we have to, and maybe that's what happens.
Well, we thought the Pelicans are one of the best horses in the NBA. We have found out a little bit different in this early part of the season. They are 5-6. They are 1-1 in the in-season tournament. They snapped a 5-game losing streak against the Mavericks after a back-to-back against the Mavericks. They got blown out on Sunday. They come back and win 131-110. This looked like what we saw against the Mavs in the second game, looked like the team we thought they were going to be.
Yeah, and that's maybe what we'll see down the road. I don't panic in November. So,
and you shouldn't.
Yeah,
you don't know anything about the NBA until 20 games in, right? At least.
Right. It was encouraging to see that a team that blew you out 30 points 2 nights ago, you beat by almost 30 the next 2 nights later. So, and that's a good sign. At least that, when you see some of these parts, having Herb Jones he's playing great defensive.
Incredible.
Like, he's playing great right now. Again, we're still trying to figure out, Zion and BI are still trying to figure out how they kind of mesh on the floor, and how they are supposed to play together. You still don't have CJ McCollum. You still don't have Trey Murphy.
Right. Alvarado.
Alvarado's been hurt. So there's it's still incomplete right now. They're still winning the games they need to win, or kind of keeping pace there. But it is so early in the NBA season that I wouldn't really panic that the Pelicans are really, really good or really, really bad. It's just, once they get healthy, get a couple more games to see how it kind of meshes. I'll tell you, when Zion and Brandon Ingram, they figure out how to play with each other on the court in terms of, who's going to be, the alpha one night, or who's going to. Sure. If they figure all that stuff out, then they're going to be fine. Right. So right now, it's good that they at least responded from a beat down and beat down the same team, 2 nights later.
Brett, my issue has been energy and effort. You know, again, look, I know the injuries have hurt them. You cannot lose C.J. McCollum and now Larry Nance is on the injured list, and you've got Alvarado and Marshall. Especially Marshall and Alvarado, who are sparks along with Herb Jones and with the little things that they do. But it's the energy and effort that we don't see consistently night after night. Right.
Well, Najee's an energy guy, and he came back.
Yes. And you saw the difference in the team.
And between Herb's defense and Najee's energy. And he actually had a good game in terms of just finishing around the rim too, which he doesn't always do, but he did that night, and that can make a big difference on a given night when you get they had something like 44 points from the bench that night or something like that, and that's huge. So they're figuring out, and so is Jordan Hawkins figuring out himself. I mean, they're figuring out how to use him. So 32 threes in his first 11 games is a record for the first 11 games. And so you'd like to think that he would progress and continue to get better in that regard. Then Trey Murphy comes back, and the floor is a lot more spread out for penetrators like Ingram and paint guys like Zion. And I mean, they have a lot to figure out. There's still a high ceiling there. The issue is for me would be exactly what you said, which is, you want to see the maturity and professionalism.
Yeah, every night.
And that
emulate C.J. McCollum.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the part that's missing to kind of give you that boost, is have somebody like that going, hey, like, if you want to be a good team, this is what we do consistently night in, night out.
Well, Herb told y'all yesterday, right? He said what he said. He said that all he tries to do is make guys play hard, right?
Right, and you need guys like that, and that's the thing. I think they want to coast, especially with guys like like Zion. I know he says he's taking a backseat to this offense, but like, he hasn't played a full 82, or at least played a majority of that. So it is kind of hard for them to know how to do that when they haven't done it for a full season. So we'll see if as long as he's around. And I always say this: as long as Zion, Brandon, or at least a majority of this team is around for the final 20, and they're getting that push, that's all that matters, honestly.
Got a final say.
I'm with Ricardo on that. I mean, I think as long as they're around for the final push, because look, you would have thought this season could very well be the opposite of last season, right? Which is they looked like one of the best teams in the league at New Year's, and then everything fell apart. Not completely fell apart. They still made the postseason, but they didn't make the playoffs. It kind of fizzled. So, and injuries had a lot to do with that. So you need to have some luck with health, and they need to get a little more synergy and hopefully just we see some more maturity along the way.
No doubt. Could you give us a little preview of the River Bell Classic, which is tonight?
Right, yeah. Nichols and Southeastern once again go for the River Bell. Southeastern won last year, so Nichols is trying to get the bell this year. Southeastern 0-7 start, and they were out last 3, so they're looking for a 4th straight win. Nichols, they're back on top of the South League. Like, give credit to Tim Rebo turning that thing around. That running attack of Colin Guggenheim and Jalen Spears has been so good, and I think that is going to be the difference tonight. If I had to pick a winner, I think Nichols will pull it out. But they're going to be, that running attack is going to be a very dangerous team when they get into the FCS playoffs. We'll see if they can lead them to one win. But yeah, that game, again, I've seen it unfolds so many years where it doesn't matter about the record. It is truly a rivalry game where anybody can win that game. So it should be a good one in Hammond.
You'll be in Hammond, America.
I'll be in Hammond tonight, and I'll have reports on the news tonight.
Beautiful, thanks. Brett, Ricardo, thanks so much for joining us today on the program. Certainly appreciate it. Great job. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in. So many ways to catch our program now. There's a QR code on your screen that'll take you to my website, ericasher.com, or the WLAE-TV YouTube page. Click on the icon, and of course, you'll never miss the program. I'll say like I always say. Again, we have so many rebroadcasts of our program now. Set your DVR, and you'll never miss the show. Also, you can catch me on the radio, 106.1 FM. I'm on weekdays 4 to 6. You can listen live at ericasher.com. Also, again, the iHeartRadio app, the TuneIn Radio app, or our digital platforms, free download for your smartphone or tablet. Our podcast is on the Apple Spotify app. We're on all major podcasting platforms. Search Inside New Orleans Show with Eric Asher, and you'll find that. Also want to thank the underwriters who make our show possible. Each and every one of those underwriters, we appreciate them. And again, their contribution to our program. And of course, the great staff here over at WLAE-TV, the production staff that put this show together for us each and every week, which includes Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Logan Graffia, also Alex Chacon, and our fantastic director, William Hill. For Brett Martel and Ricardo LeCompte, I'm Eric Asher. Have a great week. We'll see you next week for the Thanksgiving edition edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Have a great week.